Hey guys, welcome home to You Are the Compass. As mentioned at the end of our last episode, the interviews will be on a more regular basis as we set our headings to explore further this evening. As promised, John and I will discuss boundaries and compassion, that fine line between empathy and ultimately distance. Distance from a person, a situation, an environment, all in the necessity of self-love and the continuation to grow that. I have a audio clip for you with Brene Brown, which I feel brilliantly captures the view that in order to really have an empathetic connection with someone, that our own fragilities need to be brought to the surface.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Beautiful words they are. And empathy and sympathy, you can easily clearly see the disconnection there between the two. And it also depends which way your energy flows, especially if we drain energy from other people or we give energy. Quite often reflecting back onto something that has happened in our lives, we can have empathy for somebody else. But if that thing hasn't happened in our lives, it's very difficult to put ourselves into that situation. So if we go one step further and rise above empathy to compassion, and I think it's a bit more powerful, compassion, than empathy. With compassion, well, you've got more than just a feeling for that person. The energy goes in a special way where you're very supportive with compassion. You're very supportive for that person. And you can move on to new things, but when things go wrong, and it could be a death in the family or problems happen. Take, for instance, the death in the family where a person is grieving. There's no set time limit for grieving. And when we come across a person who is grieving, we can't just shift them out of them with happy thoughts and funny situations to get them out of the grieving. No, they've got to go through that grieving process. Who knows how long that grieving process is going to take? it's something that you have to work through. With grief, you are grieving for your loss, not for the person who's moved on. You're grieving for your loss. It's either loss of friendship, loss of communication, and it could be an incomplete thing. If somebody passed on, moved on, and you haven't said all that need to be said, that relationship was very incomplete, that can hurt a lot. That can hurt a lot inside for that particular person. So the grief is very much, I'd say, the best part might be to describe as self-centered, that grief, which is good. We have to go through a grieving process. We can't just sweep it all under the carpet, have a few drinks, take on a happy face, and go forward. With other people around, they're at a funny step, at a funny connection, how to connect with that person that's grieving. Now, some people can just give the person a big hug and, wow, things become much better. You can feel that energy. But there's other people who drain energy, and that's where we're going to look into ourselves. You know, it could be the ego takes over. And look at me, I'm giving this person a hug. You know, I'm a good person. You know, I'm helping them grieve. Wrong. You're actually saving energy. Not saving, draining energy from that person.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to look inside your heart. Get out of the head and look inside your heart. Which way is the energy flowing in those particular situations? So it can be a look inside oneself, how you react to somebody who's got a problem grieving or whatever, which way your energy is flowing, how it affects you, how you feel with it. Yeah. And it can take a while to rise above that situation. In other words, instead of wallowing in it for a long time, you can get to a stage where you rise above it. And to do that, you have to realize what's the lesson in this for you to learn. We all have lessons. We go through it every day, learning lessons. These are life lessons, and they come along thick and fast for some people who aren't learning their lessons. But for the ones who are learning their lessons along the journey, it can be an interesting opening up where you get into certain situations where you see somebody who's having problems, having difficulties, and wow, what's the lesson for me to learn with this? And that can be an interesting way to look inside oneself, that you can help the other person. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense there, Jess, with all that.
Yeah, I think for me, and probably for a lot of our listeners out there, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, I don't think so, that we extend our compassion and empathy to people too often. So for too long, we've been in that situation or at workplace or the relationship where we've shown the compassion for that person, and then ultimately our boundaries are sort of crossed. Have you come across that situation where you've done that, and ways in which to change that and look within yourself to do so?
Yes, well, we're always learning that one called boundaries. That's a beautiful thing, where we find people step through our boundaries, and it can be in many different ways. And again, I get back to which way the energy flows. And it's a matter of giving and receiving. When we're in balance, when we're able to give and receive, it becomes a beautiful balance within us. But if it's one way where one is giving and the other one is taking all the time, or most of the time, it's out of balance. And that's when boundaries have to come in place to stop that, or stop your energy getting drained, stop you getting into that situation. And those boundaries come in many different forms and guises. We can cut off from that person. We can verbally tell them you've crossed my boundaries and I'm not happy with that. But you've got to be very, very careful you don't keep the game going, bouncing it back and forth. You said that, I said this, you meant this, I meant that. And the game just keeps going on and on. Sometimes those boundaries are going to be very firm. I've said my piece and move on, rather than argue the boundary out or argue the situation out. That's where it becomes detrimental, where the ego wants to be number one, wants to be right, and want to win that situation. So putting boundaries in place, wow, that's a lesson in itself. What do you think, Jess?
It kind of elevates the situation. I think it elevates your own self-love. I clearly remember a situation I was in, and I kept setting my boundaries over and over again. This was over the course of years. And then I finally said, no, I've had enough. I have enough love for myself and for this person to get out of this situation. When you take out the ego and the he said this and she said this and I love this person this and we've been together all this time, ultimately when you shed all that away, when you pull all that apart, it's yourself at the core. It's your own self-love. And if you don't love yourself enough to set those boundaries, you're going to keep ending up in those situations time and time again.
Yes, I find a lot of people are over-forgiving. And what happens when you're over-forgiving? You're used as a doormat. People will just walk over you. And it's very draining of energy, and most people don't realise how much out of balance they are. It could be a situation like, I'd like you to stay back at work and finish this project off. Oh, yes, okay, boss. Yes, okay, I'll do that. Now, you might have had plans or something like that, but it sounds like more you haven't got the ability to love yourself and respect yourself and say no. Quite often we don't say no because we're worried what people will think about us. We're worried about being rejected. So we go, okay, yeah, I'll do this for you. But you're doing it under suffering, not under love. And so many people are in work or situations or relationships where they feel they have to stay and have to be in it to keep the show going. And that's where, you're right, self-love, respecting oneself. And it gets back to who's the most important person in the world. I ask that question with many people, and hopefully the listeners will answer that. Who's the most important person in the world? And if you don't put yourself first, if you put your family, your children, your work, your religion, whatever, if you put all that first, you're not fulfilling your own life. It works this way. You fill your own cup up with love, and then there's more than enough for other people. So if you get into situations where you feel you're getting drained and it's not working for you, that's when you've got to take a look inside yourself. Not so much at the other people. Yes, you've got to put boundaries and everything with the other person and that, but have a good look inside yourself. What is blocking this unconditional love for myself? What is blocking this? Why don't I love myself 100%? And quite a few times in the past and things that have happened that we've slowly beaten ourselves up to a stage where we're not 100% loving ourselves. You can tell somebody who's very happy and very loving of themselves, they can have beautiful compassion for other people because their cup is full of love. But if somebody who doesn't love themselves, it's very difficult for you to have empathy or compassion for somebody else.
Yes. 100%. Well, we might wrap it up there, John. That's been a short and sweet one. I think you've got to get off and do some balances yourself.
Yeah, I've got a busy day today. Lots happening, and a few energy balances I'm doing with people to find out what are the blockages for the energy flowing through. And I do a lot of this work, And it's interesting finding out what are the emotional, mental, and trauma blockages in people that actually stop them loving themselves. So it's an interesting journey people can go on when they do get a balance. Okay, Jess, lovely talking with you. Have a fantastic day, and we'll get together again for another session.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us this evening. Get set to dial those compass headings in a totally different direction, while still having the underpinning forethought of our last discussion on boundaries. I'm really excited to introduce to the show an open discussion on open relationships, how connection, honesty, trust, and ultimately self-love is everything in life.